Denise Arrowood was 58 years old when she drove 4 hours to the Atlanta wedding venue she had personally selected, carrying centerpiece boxes she'd spent 3 weekends building by hand. She wasn't there for applause. She was there because that's what she did. She showed up. She built things. She made beautiful moments out of nothing, the way she had her entire life. The venue coordinator pulled her aside with the look of someone delivering a diagnosis. She handed Denise a revised document. Denise's name wasn't on the seating chart. It was on the security list. Her own photo. At the venue she had paid $100,000 for. $100,000 from her retirement savings, her late mother's insurance settlement, and a personal loan she hadn't told a single soul about, because Aaliyah had asked once, cried once, and Denise could not say no to her daughter. What none of them understood yet, not Aaliyah, not Gloria Whitfield, not the fiancé who knew and said nothing, was that every single contract at that wedding had one name on it. Hers. Denise carried her centerpiece boxes back to the car, set them in the trunk carefully, drove 2 miles to a gas station and sat in complete silence for 11 minutes. Then she picked up her phone. What she did next made her daughter cry harder than she had ever cried in her life. And it was only the beginning. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. Denise sat at her kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the well-tended peace lily on the windowsill. The plant was a gift from Aaliyah when she graduated college, the first in their family to do so. The invoice in front of her was printed on expensive cream paper, the kind that spoke of luxury weddings and dreams come true. Loretta moved around the small kitchen with the familiarity of someone who had spent countless Sunday mornings here, the coffee pot gurgling steadily in the background. The aroma of dark roast filled the space, mixing with the lingering scent of the lemon-scented cleaner Denise always used. "These numbers," Denise murmured, running her finger down the column. Her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, the same way they had when she'd helped Aaliyah with homework all those years ago. The deposit amounts don't match what we discussed. The vision board on the fridge caught her eye again. Aaliyah's baby picture, all chubby cheeks and bright eyes, smiled next to the magazine cutout of a designer wedding gown. The contrast between then and now made something twist in Denise's chest. "When was the last time you actually spoke to her?" Loretta asked, setting down a fresh cup of coffee. The ceramic clinked against the worn wooden table, the same table where Denise had helped Aaliyah fill out college applications, where they'd celebrated acceptance letters, where they'd planned this wedding that now felt like it was slipping through her fingers. 2 weeks ago, Denise replied, her voice steady despite the worry gnawing at her stomach. She texts, but... She picked up her phone, scrolling through the messages. Short replies, always ending conversations before they could really start. The loan paperwork sat in a neat folder beside her, the terms spelled out in black and white. Denise had read every word before signing, just like she'd read every permission slip and report card in Aaliyah's life. 3 jobs over 20 years to make sure her daughter never felt the word no the way she had growing up. Remember when she wanted those dance lessons? Denise smiled faintly, touching the edge of the invoice. Worked extra shifts at the post office for 6 months straight. And she got that solo at the recital. Loretta nodded, settling into the chair across from her sister. You were so proud you cried right through it. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking time in the quiet morning. Denise's fingers traced the edge of her mother's old tablecloth, the one she'd inherited along with the life insurance money that was now tied up in wedding deposits. 6 weeks, Denise said finally. 6 weeks since she sent any updates about the vendors. I asked about the seating chart last week. You know what she said? Loretta raised an eyebrow, waiting. Mom, Gloria has some thoughts about the arrangement. Can we talk about it later? Denise's voice was quiet, precise. Gloria has thoughts about everything lately. The morning light caught the silver in Denise's locks. Hair she'd worn naturally since the day she decided she was done changing herself to make others comfortable. The same determination that had gotten her through raising a child alone, through night school while working full-time, through every obstacle life had thrown at her. She picked up her phone again, dialing Aaliyah's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Again. Her daughter's cheerful greeting played through the speaker. Hey, this is Aaliyah. Leave a message and I'll call you back. Denise ended the call without leaving a message. This would make 3 unanswered calls now. She set the phone down beside the invoice, the screen dark and silent. "Something doesn't feel right," she said finally, looking up at her sister. Loretta said nothing. She just reached for the coffee pot and topped off Denise's cup, the dark liquid steaming in the morning light. The silence between them was heavy with understanding, with years of shared history, with the weight of a mother's love meeting the first edges of doubt. The vision board watched from the fridge, Aaliyah's innocent baby smile frozen in time, the wedding dress gleaming with promises that were starting to feel hollow in the quiet of the Sunday morning kitchen. The Monday morning sun was barely cresting the horizon when Denise pulled out of her parking spot in Chicago. The trunk of her sensible sedan was filled with carefully packed boxes, 30 handcrafted centerpieces she'd spent 3 weekends assembling. Each one contained a delicate arrangement of preserved flowers, fairy lights, and hand-painted table numbers. The drive to Atlanta stretched before her like a ribbon of possibilities. 4 hours into the journey, her back ached from sitting, but she didn't stop. The venue's elegant gates appeared just after noon, the converted estate rising from manicured grounds like something from a bridal magazine. Denise had chosen it herself, writing the largest check she'd ever signed for the deposit. She parked in the circular drive, taking a moment to smooth her cotton blouse and check her appearance in the rearview mirror. The estate's massive wooden doors opened easily, welcoming her into a marble-floored foyer that still made her catch her breath, despite having seen it twice before. "Mrs. Arrowwood?" The venue coordinator, Pam, approached with quick steps that echoed off the high ceiling. Something in her expression made Denise's stomach tighten, the same look doctors wear before delivering bad news. "I brought the centerpieces," Denise said, gesturing toward her car. 30 boxes, just like we discussed. "Could you step into my office for a moment?" Pam's voice was gentle, too gentle. She led Denise down a hallway lined with photos of happy couples, past the grand ballroom where Aaliyah was supposed to dance with her mother at the reception. Pam's office was small but elegant, with wedding photos and vendor contracts organized in neat files behind her desk. She closed the door softly and reached for a folder. "There have been some changes to the arrangements," Pam began, her fingers hesitating over the paper. "I received an updated seating chart last week." The paper she slid across the desk was printed on the same cream-colored stock as all the other wedding documents. Denise scanned the names, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She read it twice, then a third time, looking for her own name among the carefully arranged tables. It wasn't there. "There's more," Pam said quietly, turning to the next page. "I'm required to show you this." The security directive was typed in clean, professional font. Below it was Denise's driver's license photo, the one from her last renewal where she'd finally smiled with her natural gray locks showing. The words beneath it were stark. "Per bride's request, Denise Arrowwood is no longer attending. Please update security with photo for non-admittance." The air in the office seemed to thin. Denise's hands remained perfectly still on the desk, her fingers resting on the paper like they might find different words if they searched long enough. "Is this signed by my daughter?" Her voice came out steady, the same voice that had read bedtime stories and helped with college essays and said yes to every dream Aaliyah had ever voiced. Pam turned to the last page. There it was, Aaliyah's signature, the same elegant script Denise had praised when her daughter was learning cursive in middle school. "I'm so sorry," Pam whispered. Denise stood up slowly, smoothing her slacks with the same careful attention she'd given to pressing Aaliyah's graduation gown. "I'll get the centerpieces from my car." She walked back through the marble foyer, each step measured and precise. The trunk opened with a soft click, and she lifted each box with the gentleness she'd used when they were new, when they represented joy instead of whatever this moment was becoming. Back inside, she placed the boxes on a side table near Pam's office. Her hands lingered for a moment on the last one, feeling the careful folds she'd made in the paper, the corners she'd reinforced so they would travel safely. "Thank you for your time," she said to Pam, her voice neither breaking nor rising. She walked back to her car with her head high, the same way she'd walked into parent-teacher conferences and college tours and wedding dress shops. The gas station was 2 miles down the road, a small brick building with faded signs and empty parking spots behind it. Denise pulled in and turned off the engine. The silence filled the car like water, deep and heavy. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting in her lap, watching the digital clock on her dashboard count off 11 minutes. Each number changing felt like another piece of understanding falling into place, another question finding its answer. At exactly the 12th minute, she picked up her phone and pressed Loretta's number. Her sister answered on the first ring. "Start making some calls," Denise said, her voice as clear and sharp as breaking glass. The hotel room was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning when Denise settled at the small desk. The surface was just wide enough for her laptop and the thick manila folder containing every wedding contract she'd signed over the past year. She opened her notes app, created a new document, and titled it simply, Contracts. Her hands moved across the keyboard with the same steadiness they'd shown at the venue. The list grew methodically: venue, catering, flowers, photography, music, transportation, accommodations, honeymoon package. Each line represented thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours of overtime shifts, careful budgeting, and dreams she'd held for her only child. When her phone rang, Aaliyah's name appeared on the screen. Denise answered on the third ring, her voice neutral. "Hello, baby." "Mom." Aaliyah's tone was practiced, therapized, the kind of voice that came with pre-written talking points. "I know you're upset, and I understand why, but I need you to understand where I'm coming from." Denise said nothing. She just listened. "Sometimes you make things about yourself," Aaliyah continued, the words flowing like she'd rehearsed them in front of a mirror. "Gloria, Brennan's mom, she just wants what's best for the family image, and your presence might send the wrong message. This isn't personal. It's about fitting in with their world." The silence stretched between them. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm listening," Denise said quietly. "I need you to understand this is about boundaries and growth, about becoming who I'm meant to be." Aaliyah's voice took on an almost pleading quality. "Can you understand that?" Denise looked at the list on her screen, at the folder full of contracts bearing her signature. "I understand completely," she said, her voice level. "I need you to understand something too. I'll call you back." She ended the call before Aaliyah could respond. Opening the vendor folder, Denise began with the venue contract. She dialed Pam's direct line, her tone professional and clear. "This is Denise Arrowwood. I need to cancel all services contracted under my name. No, they cannot be transferred. Yes, I understand about the deposit." The next call went to the catering company. Then the florist. With each conversation, Denise's voice remained steady, her words precise. Yes, she was aware of the cancellation fees. No, she would not authorize a transfer of services. Yes, she understood this was unusual. The photographer agreed to return half the deposit. The string quartet kept their booking fee but released the date. The cake baker expressed genuine sympathy and promised to refund everything but the tasting fee. The limo company tried to argue but fell silent when Denise calmly read the cancellation clause from their own contract. The hotel block dissolved with a single email. The honeymoon package, a surprise she'd planned by working extra shifts for 6 months, reversed back to her credit card with a single phone call. Hours passed. The sun set outside her window. Denise worked methodically, checking off each item on her list, saving confirmation emails in a new folder, noting refund amounts in her spreadsheet. She didn't stop for dinner. She didn't cry. She just worked, the same way she'd worked every day of Aaliyah's life to make something from nothing. At 11 p.m., her phone lit up with Aaliyah's name again. This time, the voice on the other end was anything but composed. "How could you do this?" Aaliyah's words came out between gasps. "The venue called. Everything's canceled. The caterer, the flowers, everything. How could you?" Denise sat back in her chair, looking at the completed list on her screen. "Baby," she said softly, "you uninvited me. You didn't cancel a guest. You canceled the mother who paid for all of it. I just agreed with you." She ended the call and set the phone face down on the desk. The air conditioning hummed. The cursor blinked at the bottom of her list. Denise sat in the silence she had built herself, as solid and sure as every other foundation she'd ever laid. The morning sun cast long shadows across Denise's driveway as she pulled in, her car still packed with the centerpiece boxes she'd driven to Atlanta with such hope just days before. She didn't reach for her seatbelt immediately. Instead, she sat there, hands still on the wheel, watching the early spring light play across her windshield. Her coat felt too heavy now, but she didn't remove it. The weight seemed fitting for the moment. Her phone sat silent in her purse. She'd turned off notifications after the third message from Aliyah, each one a mix of anger and carefully worded therapy language that felt more rehearsed with each reading. Finally, she reached for her house keys and went inside. The house felt different somehow, colder, despite the heat being on. The vision board on her fridge seemed to mock her now, with its carefully arranged wedding magazine clippings and that sweet baby photo of Aliyah in her first Easter dress. Denise didn't take off her coat. She didn't unpack her car. Instead, she pulled out her phone and called Loretta. Her sister answered on the first ring. "I've been waiting for you to call. Are you home?" "Just pulled in." "Good, because I need you to sit down for what I'm about to tell you." Loretta's voice had that tone, the one that meant she'd been working while Denise was driving. "Remember Darnell? My friend who coordinates those society events in Atlanta? The one who did that mayor's inauguration? That's him. Well, he's been making some calls." "And baby?" Loretta paused. "There was a luncheon, 8 weeks ago, at the Whitfield estate." Denise lowered herself into her kitchen chair. "What kind of luncheon?" "A bridal luncheon. Formal. Printed invitations and everything. Gloria Whitfield hosted it for Aliyah." Loretta's voice was gentle but firm. "There's more. Tell me." The invitation. It listed Gloria as Aliyah's mother figure for this new chapter. Your name wasn't anywhere on it, not even mentioned. Denise's hand tightened on the phone, but her voice remained steady. And Aliyah was there? Front and center in all the photos, smiling like she was born to it. Darnell said they had it framed, displayed at the venue. Same venue you paid for. Denise stood up slowly and walked to her desk, where she kept her detailed records of everything related to the wedding. She pulled out her phone bill, her bank statements, her calendar where she'd marked every vendor meeting and payment date. 8 weeks ago, she said quietly, spreading the papers on her kitchen table. That would be mid-February, Loretta confirmed. Denise's finger traced down her phone records. She called me February 18th, asked me to wire another $5,000 for the upgraded flower package. Her hand moved to the bank statement. I sent it that same day. She called again on the 22nd about the honeymoon deposit. While the luncheon photos were probably still being developed, Loretta said, her voice hard now. Denise continued through her records, mapping out the timeline with the precision she'd learned from decades of stretching budgets to their limit. Every call, every request, every transfer of money, all happening after that luncheon where her daughter had smiled for photos while Gloria Whitfield claimed her publicly. This wasn't last minute, Denise said, her voice almost clinical now. This wasn't panic or pressure, this was a plan. One she agreed to while she was still asking me for money. Denise? No. Denise's voice was firm. Don't comfort me. Not right now. She pulled out a fresh notebook, the kind she used to track her patients' medications and schedules. What I need is for you to tell me everything Darnell knows, every detail, and I need you to get me a copy of that invitation photo. Loretta didn't argue. She understood what was happening. This wasn't a mother's grief anymore. This was Denise Arrowwood building a case. 20 minutes later, Denise's phone buzzed with an incoming photo. The invitation was everything Loretta had described: cream-colored paper, gold lettering, and Gloria Whitfield's name prominent as the host, as the mother figure, as the woman Aliyah had chosen to stand beside while spending her real mother's money. Denise printed the photo and walked to her kitchen wall. With precise movements, she taped it up next to her folder of vendor invoices. She stepped back and looked at it, her face as composed as it had been in that venue parking lot. All right, she said quietly. Let's see what else is there. The morning light had shifted, casting new shadows across her kitchen wall. The vision board on her fridge still held that Easter dress photo, but Denise wasn't looking at it anymore. Her eyes were fixed on the evidence wall she'd started building, her mind already moving toward what came next. The morning light filtered through Denise's kitchen window, casting a soft glow on the yellow legal pad positioned precisely at the center of her table. She had arranged everything with the same attention to detail she'd used throughout her postal service career. Bank statements chronologically ordered, calculator at her right hand, and a fresh cup of coffee that would soon go untouched. Her fingers moved across the statements with practiced efficiency. 32 years of stretching a postal worker's salary had taught her how to read financial documents like some people read mystery novels, looking for the story hidden in the numbers. "Show me," she whispered to the papers spread before her. "Show me what I couldn't see before." The first transfer jumped out at her, $3,500 wired to Alia's account last spring. Her daughter's voice echoed in her memory. "Mom, it's just easier if I handle the vendor deposits directly. You know how crazy wedding planning is." Denise noted the date and amount in her precise handwriting, then moved to the next statement. Another transfer. This time, $1,800. "The dress deposit needs to go through my account," Alia had explained. "The rewards miles will help with the honeymoon costs." The honeymoon. Denise's pen paused over her pad. $7,500 transferred directly to Brennan's account because the resort's booking system works better with the groom's name. She'd agreed without hesitation. After all, this was her future son-in-law, the man her daughter loved. Line by line, transfer by transfer, the pattern emerged. What had seemed like reasonable requests in isolation now formed a clear picture when laid out chronologically. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as Denise's trust was confirmed with each successful transfer. Her hand remained steady as she wrote each figure, but her coffee grew cold beside her, untouched. The morning light shifted to afternoon as she reconstructed 14 months of systematic extraction. $4,200 for the photographer's deposit, transferred to Alia's account but never reaching the actual photographer, as yesterday's calls had confirmed. $5,800 for the catering advance, another direct transfer that the caterer had never received. $6,500 for the wedding planner's services, a service that, as Denise discovered through her calls, had actually been arranged and paid for by Gloria Whitfield months ago. The numbers marched down her legal pad in neat columns, each one representing a moment when her daughter had looked her in the eye and asked for money she never intended to use as promised. Denise paused only once, when she came to an entry from mid-February, the same week those luncheon invitations would have been at the printers. "Mom," Alia had said, her voice warm over the phone, "I found the perfect flowers, but we need to upgrade the package. Just 5,000 more. I'll handle it directly with them, okay?" Denise had sent the wire that same day, proud of being able to give her daughter the wedding she deserved. The final tally made her lean back in her chair. $34,000 in transfers to accounts she couldn't touch. Money that had never reached a single vendor, never purchased a single wedding service. The remaining $66,000 she'd managed to protect by canceling the contracts in her name. But these transfers, these were gone. She reached for her phone, photographing each bank statement methodically. The afternoon light caught the silver in her locks as she bent over the documents, capturing every detail. When she was done, she sat back and looked at the total again. This wasn't carelessness. This wasn't poor planning. This was extraction, performed with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Someone who had been smiling in luncheon photos while signing, "Love you, Mom," to text messages requesting more transfers. Denise picked up her phone again, this time to make a call she'd never imagined needing. The family law office receptionist answered on the second ring. "Yes," Denise said, her voice calm. "I'd like to schedule a consultation regarding financial fraud in a domestic situation." She provided her information with the same precision she'd used to document the transfers. The sun was setting by the time she finished organizing her documents. The kitchen had grown dim, but she didn't turn on the lights yet. Instead, she picked up her pen one last time and added a single line at the bottom of her legal pad. "She asked me for the money during the same week the luncheon invitations were printed." She underlined it twice, each line as straight as her spine had remained throughout the day. Then she closed the pad, stood up, and reached for the light switch, leaving the cold coffee untouched on the table. Denise sat in her favorite armchair, her phone in one hand, and Darnell's business card in the other. She'd been putting off this call, knowing that once she made it, there would be no one knowing what she learned. The morning sun cast long shadows across her living room as she dialed. "Cousin Dee," she said when he answered. "I need your professional insight about the Whitfield family." There was a pause on the other end. "I was wondering when you'd call," Darnell replied, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been holding on to difficult information. "Give me a minute to close my office door." Denise heard movement, then the soft click of a door. She waited, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the legal pad balanced on her knee. "Before you start," Darnell said, "let me ask you something. Has Aaliyah mentioned Brennan's brother's first wife?" "No," Denise answered. "I didn't even know he was married before." "That's exactly what I thought." Darnell's chair creaked as he settled in. "Listen carefully, cousin. What's happening isn't just about your daughter or your money. Gloria Whitfield has a pattern, and you need to understand it." Over the next hour, Darnell laid out a story that made Denise's methodical notes grow increasingly detailed. 6 years ago, Brennan's older brother had married a woman named Rachel. Like Aaliyah, she'd come from outside Gloria's preferred social circle. Like Aaliyah, she'd been welcomed with elaborate displays of acceptance. The luncheon started about 3 months in, Darnell explained. Gloria hosting events where Rachel's mother was conspicuously not invited. Small comments about elevating Rachel's presentation. Suggestions about distancing herself from certain family connections to focus on her new life. Denise's pen moved steadily across the page. "How long did it last?" 18 months, Darnell said. By the end, Rachel was isolated from her support system, trying to meet impossible standards, and convinced her family background was holding her back. The marriage collapsed under the pressure. But here's what you really need to know, Denise. Gloria had the replacement lined up before the divorce was final. The replacement? Catherine Beaumont. Old Atlanta money, private school connections, exactly the kind of daughter-in-law Gloria wanted. She and the brother were married within a year of his divorce. That marriage is still going strong. Denise set her pen down slowly. "And no one saw the pattern?" "People saw," Darnell corrected. "But Gloria's smart. She never does anything that looks obviously wrong. It's all suggestion and social pressure and careful positioning. By the time anyone could prove what was happening, Rachel was already gone. And now she's doing it to my daughter." "Yes," Darnell confirmed. "But there's something else you need to understand. Aaliyah isn't the end goal here. She's what we call a placeholder in real estate. Someone who holds the space until the preferred tenant is ready to move in." The implications settled over Denise like a heavy blanket. She thought about the luncheon photos, Aaliyah's bright smile, the careful way Gloria had been positioning herself as a mother figure for this new chapter. "She's not embracing my daughter," Denise said slowly. "She's isolating her, setting her up to fail." "Exactly. And based on what I've heard through my channels, she already has someone in mind to replace Aaliyah when the time comes. Old family connections, the right social background, everything Gloria thinks the Whitfield name requires." Denise looked at her notes, at the pattern laid out in black and white. This wasn't just about wedding vendors and uninvitations. This was predatory, a system designed to consume young women and discard them when they'd served their purpose. "I need to expand my legal consultation," she said, more to herself than to Darnell. "You do that," he agreed. "And Denise, when you move on this, remember, Gloria's power comes from people not naming what she does. Name it. Name all of it." After ending the call with Darnell, Denise spent an hour updating her legal notes. Then she picked up her phone again and dialed Gloria Whitfield's number. It rang twice before a smooth, cultured voice answered. "This is Gloria." "Mrs. Whitfield," Denise said, her voice as level as a foundation. "This is Denise Arrowood. I'm calling to let you know that I'm aware of the bridal luncheon where you presented yourself as my daughter's mother figure." She paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough. "I'm also aware of what happened to Rachel and how quickly Catherine was ready to step in. And the $34,000 that was redirected from my accounts. That's a matter I'm currently considering how to address." She could hear Gloria's sharp intake of breath, but she continued before the other woman could speak. "I wanted you to know what I know before the family dinner." Without waiting for a response, Denise ended the call and set her phone down beside her legal pad. The afternoon light caught the silver in her locks as she sat back, her work for the moment complete. The morning sun cast long shadows across the downtown Atlanta cafe as Denise sat at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee. She'd chosen this spot carefully, close enough to Brennan's office to be convenient, but public enough to keep the conversation contained. Through the window, she watched him approach, his expensive suit and careful posture marking him as someone who'd never had to question his place in the world. Brennan spotted her immediately, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He ordered at the counter before joining her, his movements betraying a nervousness that his polished exterior couldn't quite hide. "Mrs. Arrowwood," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Thank you for reaching out." Denise studied him for a moment. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers tapped against his coffee cup. This was a man who knew something uncomfortable was coming. "I appreciate you meeting me," she said, her voice steady and neutral. She didn't smile, didn't offer the warmth she might have shown just weeks ago. "I have one question for you, Brennan." He nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. "Did you know I was being uninvited before or after your mother suggested it?" The silence that followed was deafening. Brennan's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, guilt, resignation. He looked down at his coffee, then out the window, anywhere but at Denise's steady gaze. The longer he stayed quiet, the more his silence confirmed what she already knew. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before." Denise took a slow sip of her coffee, letting the moment stretch. "She told me it was already handled," he continued, words tumbling out now. "That it would be better this way, that sometimes difficult decisions had to be made for the family's image. I should have said something." "Yes," Denise agreed simply. "You should have." "I'm sorry," he offered, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "I know that doesn't change anything, but I am sorry." Denise set her cup down carefully, the soft clink against the saucer precise and deliberate. She pulled out her phone, opened her notes app, and typed a quick entry with the date, time, and summary of his admission. She made sure he could see her doing it. "Thank you for your honesty," she said, rising from her chair. Her voice remained level, neither angry nor forgiving. "I needed to hear it directly from you." "Mrs. Arrowwood," Brennan started, half rising from his seat. "I know my mother can be difficult. But Aaliyah, she made her choices," Denise finished for him. "Just like you made yours." She gathered her purse and coat, her movements unhurried. "You're right that your apology doesn't change anything, but it does confirm everything." Leaving Brennan with his cooling coffee and his guilt, Denise walked to her car. The morning had warmed considerably, but she barely noticed the temperature. Her mind was already on her next appointment. An hour later, she sat across from her attorney, laying out document after document on the polished desk. Bank statements, transfer records, text messages, and now her dated notes from the coffee meeting with Brennan. "The paper trail is quite strong," her attorney confirmed, reviewing the materials. "The timeline of transfers combined with the documented deception creates a clear case for recovery of the funds." "I want the demand letter prepared," Denise said, "but not sent until after the family dinner at the end of the week." Her attorney nodded, making notes. "The full amount of $34,000? "Every penny," Denise confirmed, "but timing matters here. The dinner needs to happen first." Once the meeting concluded, Denise sat in her car in the law office parking lot. She pulled out her phone and called Loretta. "Hey, sister," she said when Loretta answered. "I need you to host the family dinner at your house." "You want me to handle it?" Loretta asked, surprise evident in her voice. "Yes, and I need you to invite Aaliyah," Denise continued. "Tell her to bring Brennan." She paused for a moment before adding, "And tell her she can invite Gloria if she wants." The line went quiet for a long moment. "You sure?" Loretta finally asked, concern evident in her voice. Denise looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, saw the quiet certainty in her own eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything." The early evening light filtered through Loretta's dining room windows, casting a warm glow on the simple white tablecloth and modest place settings. No fancy centerpieces, no elaborate decorations, just clean plates, water glasses, and silverware arranged with care. The simplicity felt right to Denise as she took her seat at the head of the table, placing a well-worn manila folder precisely in front of her. She'd arrived 20 minutes early, giving herself time to settle into the quiet. The folder's edges were slightly frayed from constant handling over the past weeks, its contents organized chronologically. a paper trail of betrayal laid out in black and white. Denise poured herself a glass of water, took a small sip, and waited. Gloria arrived first, sweeping in like she was entering a society luncheon. Her cream-colored designer suit looked expensive enough to cover a month of Denise's mortgage payments. She paused briefly in the doorway, assessing the room as if planning how to command it, before taking her seat with practiced grace. "Denise," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced warmth that had probably worked on countless others before. "I trust we can handle this evening civilly." Denise simply nodded, her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than words. Aaliyah and Brennan arrived together minutes later. Aaliyah's usual confidence was nowhere to be seen. She moved like someone approaching a witness stand. Brennan's hand rested on her lower back, but the gesture seemed more nervous than supportive. They took their seats without meeting anyone's eyes directly. Loretta moved quietly around the table, filling water glasses. The only sound was ice clicking against glass and the soft whisper of fabric as people shifted in their chairs. Without preamble, Denise opened the folder. "I think it's time we looked at some numbers," she said, her voice steady and clear. She began laying out documents one by one, sliding them across the table toward Aaliyah. First wire transfer March 15th last year, $15,000 for what was listed as venue deposits. She continued methodically, each paper accompanied by dates and amounts. April 3rd, $8,000 for the catering deposit. May 22nd, $5,000 for the dress down payment. The papers formed a growing stack in front of Aaliyah, who stared at them without touching them. July 8th, $6,000 for the honeymoon booking in Brennan's name. Denise's voice remained even, as if reading from a grocery list. No accusation, just facts. Total redirected funds, $34,000. Gloria's perfectly manicured hand reached for her water glass, but Denise noticed the slight tremor in her fingers. "Now," Denise turned slightly to face Gloria directly, "I'd like to discuss the luncheon you hosted 8 weeks ago. The one where you described yourself as Aaliyah's mother figure for this new chapter." She pulled out a photo of the framed invitation. "I'm particularly interested in the timeline here because this luncheon happened while my daughter was still accepting my money." Gloria's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "I was simply trying to welcome Aaliyah into our family circle." "Was this the plan from the beginning?" Denise interrupted quietly. "I'd like to understand the timeline." "I don't appreciate what you're implying," Gloria responded, her voice taking on that wounded tone that had probably served her well in past confrontations. Denise simply repeated the question, her calm unwavering. "Was this the plan from the beginning?" The silence stretched thick and heavy across the table. Then Denise turned to her daughter, asking the question she'd carried like a weight. "Did you choose to uninvite me?" Aaliyah's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head, words tumbling out between sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I thought," she said, "it would be better this way. My mother," Brennan spoke up, his voice strained. "She told me it was already handled, that it would be easier if everyone just accepted it. I should have said something. I should have stopped it." Gloria stood abruptly, gathering her designer purse. No dramatic declarations, no defensive arguments. She simply turned and walked out, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor as she left. The quiet departure somehow felt more damning than any outburst could have been. Loretta, who had been standing silently by the kitchen door throughout the entire scene, watched Gloria's retreat. "That tells you everything you need to know," she said softly, the words hanging in the air like a final verdict. The remainder of the dinner passed in a blur of tears and fractured explanations. Eventually, Brennan led a still-crying Aaliyah out, leaving Denise sitting at the head of the table, while Loretta quietly cleared away the untouched plates and full water glasses. They worked in companionable silence for several minutes, the familiar rhythm of cleanup offering a small comfort after the evening's intensity. Finally, Loretta paused, leaning against the counter. "What now?" she asked simply. Denise gathered the documents back into their folder with steady hands. "Now the letter goes out." The certified mail receipt arrived in Denise's email 3 days after the family dinner. She studied the digital signature for a moment, then closed her laptop. The timing meant Aaliyah would be home from work, probably just finishing dinner. The call would come soon. Her phone rang exactly 17 minutes later. "Are you really doing this?" Aaliyah's voice was different now. Not tear-filled like at the dinner, but hollow with the particular kind of shock that comes when consequences finally arrive in official language. "Yes," Denise replied simply, her voice steady. "The documentation is very clear. Every transfer, every date, every conversation. The legal exposure here isn't on my side." The silence stretched between them, filled with all the words they'd never said about shame and belonging, and the price of access to a world that was never going to truly welcome either of them. "I can't believe you're taking me to court," Aaliyah finally said. "I'm asking you to return money that was taken under false pretenses," Denise corrected gently. "The court part is optional depending on your response. But either way, this is happening." The call ended shortly after. Denise sat with her phone in her hand for a long moment, then went to make tea. Over the next few weeks, the ripples spread outward like circles in still water. The wedding infrastructure, built entirely on Denise's careful financial planning and vendor relationships, had collapsed completely. With no venue, no caterer, no photographer, and no honeymoon package, Aaliyah and Brennan struggled to assemble a replacement event. The timeline was too short, the costs too high to absorb suddenly. The wedding date came and went without ceremony. Denise marked it quietly, lighting a candle in her kitchen and saying a prayer. Not for vengeance, but for wisdom. For everyone involved. Then the secondary consequences began rolling in, each one striking with precise impact. Brennan's father, a careful man who prided himself on financial propriety, learned the full scope of what had happened. The resulting argument with Gloria shook the foundations of the Whitfield household. Their carefully maintained image of gracious Southern success developed cracks that no amount of social maneuvering could quite repair. Darnell moved through Atlanta's professional circles with deliberate care, ensuring the story traveled in the way that mattered most. Not as gossip over cocktails, but as relevant character context in rooms where business decisions were made. "You might want to know how they handled their son's wedding situation," he would say quietly to the right people at the right moments. "It speaks to how they approach obligations." The damage was subtle, but significant. The Whitfields found themselves excluded from certain dinner parties, passed over for certain board positions. Their social currency, built on appearance and influence, experienced a quiet but steady deflation. 60 days after the demand letter arrived, the settlement notification appeared in Denise's email. $34,000, transferred in full. She studied the transaction details carefully, noting the originating account information. The money had come from Brennan's personal accounts, not Aaliyah's, a detail that told its own story about the state of their relationship. That evening, Denise sat at her kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea growing cold beside her. The vision board on her refrigerator caught her eye, that careful collage of dreams she'd helped build. Aaliyah's baby photos still smiled out from the center, surrounded by magazine clippings of white dresses and flower arrangements that would never become reality. She stood slowly, walked to the refrigerator, and gently unpinned the bridal gown clipping. The glossy paper felt lighter than it should, considering all the weight it had carried. She held it for a moment, remembering the day Aaliyah had shown her the original image, eyes shining with possibility. Then she set it aside, deliberately, but not angrily. The baby photo remained where it was, because some loves survive their disappointments, even when they can't erase them. Denise returned to her seat, picked up her tea, and took a sip despite its temperature. The quiet of her kitchen felt different now, not heavy with betrayal, but calm with the particular peace that comes from standing firmly in your own truth, whatever it costs. The morning sun cast long shadows across the worn wooden boards of Denise's New Orleans porch. The air was thick with jasmine and the promise of another humid day, but for now, the early hour kept things bearable. She sat in her favorite rocking chair, the one she'd rescued from a local antique shop and restored herself, just like she was restoring everything else in her life. Her coffee steamed in the morning light as she looked out at her street. Her street, bought and paid for with money that had almost funded someone else's dream. The narrow shotgun house behind her wasn't fancy, but it was solid. Real. Like everything else she'd built for herself over the years. Darnell had helped her find it. using his real estate connections to locate something with good bones that needed just enough work to keep her hands and mind busy. They'd spent weekends stripping wallpaper, patching plaster, and discovering the home's original character beneath years of neglect. Each repair felt like healing something in herself, too. The memory of Aliyah showing up at her Chicago apartment 2 months after the settlement still lived in her chest. Not as sharp now, but present. Her daughter had stood on the doorstep, shoulders curved inward like when she was small and in trouble, and Denise had simply stepped aside to let her in. They'd sat at the same kitchen table where Aliyah had done multiplication tables and college applications, where so many of their important conversations had happened. "Do you think I'm a bad person?" Aliyah had asked, her voice small but steady. Denise remembered how the question had hung in the air between them, heavy with everything they'd been through. She'd taken her time answering, giving the question the weight it deserved. "I think you got dazzled," she'd said finally. "And I think you made choices you can't give back. And I think you're going to have to figure out who you are without someone else's approval before you can answer that question yourself." She hadn't offered forgiveness. That wasn't what the moment needed. Instead, she'd given something more important. Truth. "I'm not done being your mother," she'd told Aliyah. "But I am done being someone you can afford to disrespect." A brass band was practicing somewhere down the block now, their music floating through the morning air like a reminder that life keeps moving forward. Denise smiled, thinking about how different her life looked these days. The community health clinic where she worked as a patient advocate was just a short walk away. She'd found she had a gift for it, helping people navigate complex systems, standing firm when institutions tried to brush aside their needs. Her own experience had taught her the value of documentation, of quiet persistence, of knowing when to push and when to wait. She heard about Gloria and the Whitfields occasionally through Darnell's network. Gloria's husband had moved to Savannah, officially for business opportunities, but everyone knew better. The Whitfield family's social position had shifted, subtle but permanent, like a foundation with a hairline crack that couldn't quite be repaired. Brennan and Aliyah were still together, trying to build something real without Gloria's interference or Denise's financial support. Denise didn't ask for details about their relationship anymore. That story belonged to them now, and she had her own to live. Inside the house, she could hear Loretta stirring. Her sister had arrived yesterday for the weekend, bringing her usual energy and a bag full of beignet mix because she insisted the cafe tourists didn't know what they were talking about. The second coffee cup waited on the counter, ready for whenever Loretta made her way to the porch. Denise adjusted her gray locks, letting them fall freely around her shoulders. She'd stopped trying to contain them, just like she'd stopped trying to contain so many other parts of herself. The morning air was sweet with possibility, and the brass band was playing something that made her want to dance, slow and easy, just because she could. This porch, this house, this life, she'd built it all herself, brick by brick and choice by choice. No one had given it to her. No one could take it away. She didn't need anyone's approval or permission to be exactly who she was. Right here in this moment, watching the sun climb higher over her piece of New Orleans. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.